We all agreed. You're not welcome at Ron's retirement celebration, my stepmother said with a smile. Good to know, I replied. Moved the $5,000 trip fund back to my account and canceled the Alaska getaway I planned. By morning, 19 missed calls and one message from my half-brother that changed everything. Trip voided. When I first got the idea, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. My name's Jake. I'm 38, and I live in Detroit. I work as a line maintenance technician for a regional airline, and I've always been a planner, not just in the job, in life, too. I like lists. I like systems. And when I realized Ron, my stepdad, was about to retire with no plans to celebrate, I knew I had to fix that. Ron's not a flashy guy. Never was. He's the kind of man who drinks black coffee in silence and believes emotion is best left unspoken. But he's the reason I'm who I am. He stepped in when I was 10, raised me like I was his own, never once reminded me I wasn't. A former machinist with steady hands and a quiet voice. Ron was the rock in our family, even if nobody said it out loud. I remember this one time, years ago, when we were watching a documentary on the Northern Lights. He stared at the screen a little too long and said, "Now that'd be something to see." That was it. He never brought it up again, but I didn't forget. So when the announcement came, Ron's last month on the job, I started planning. I opened the dusty family travel account I'd been contributing to for years. No vacations, no big trips, just quiet saving. I started making calls, booking trains and cabins across Alaska, lining up snowshoe treks and evenings in glass-roofed lodges perfect for stargazing. Every part of the itinerary was meant to slow Ron down and let him finally experience something for himself. I was so excited I couldn't sit still. At dinner, I showed the mock itinerary to Lena, my girlfriend. She looked it over, smiled wide, and said, "What if you added something personal? Like that thing Ron used to say when he came home from the shop. Tidy tools, tidy life, or whatever." I laughed. Tidy shop, clear mind. He lived by that. Exactly, she said. Put it on a thermos. Something he'll use out there, in the cold. It was perfect. I found a company that engraved stainless steel gear and ordered one that night. 2 days later, I stopped by the house to share the idea with Judith, my stepmother. I figured she'd help me pull it off, maybe surprise Ron together. She sat at the kitchen table flipping through a travel magazine when I pulled out the itinerary and the receipt from the lodge. I want to keep it small. Just you, me, and Ron. Intimate. This is his dream, and I want to give it to him. Judith smiled, that kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Oh, Jake, that's sweet. But Ron's not exactly the outdoors type anymore. Knees, remember? And Alaska? That's pretty remote, don't you think? I blinked. He's been talking about the lights for decades. Has he? She said lightly, sipping her tea. Well, maybe. But don't you think a nice local retreat would be easier? Maybe a weekend at the golf resort. Everyone can come. Your brother, your Uncle Rob, maybe the Dunlaps. My throat tightened. It's not about everyone. It's about Ron. She folded the paper in her lap and looked at me like I was being childish. We'll talk more. I'm glad you care so much. Really, I am. But something in her voice had shifted. She wasn't going to help me make this happen. She was going to take it and make it hers. It started subtly. That's what made it so easy to miss at first. A week after I showed Judith the itinerary, she sent me a text. What do you think about Crystal Ridge instead of Alaska? Less travel, easier on Ron's joints. Just a thought. I didn't respond right away. I was at work, elbow deep in the fuselage of a grounded jet, but her message burned in my pocket the whole afternoon. That night I called her. I already booked everything. The lodges, the train passes. It's non-refundable. Judith chuckled like I'd said something adorably naive. Oh, Jake, it's not about the money. We just want what's best for Ron. You've been thinking solo. I'm thinking celebration. The way she said, "we" made my skin prickle. There was no we. There was me planning this for Ron. And now her, rewriting the plan while pretending it was collaborative. By the weekend, she'd looped in Mike, my half-brother. We're 5 years apart, never close, and he'd always been quick to echo whatever Judith said. We were sitting on the porch at my dad's house when he dropped the first seed. Alaska sounds cool and all, but do you really think Ron's up for that? He hasn't done well in the cold since the knee replacement. I looked at him sideways. He does fine. He still walks the dog every morning in snow up to his shins. Mike shrugged. I'm just saying. Maybe Judith's right. Something closer to home could be easier. I knew better than to argue. He wasn't speaking from concern. He was repeating the party line. A few days later, I got a forwarded email from a mutual cousin. Can't wait for the big bash. Heard it's going to be at Willow Pines Lodge. Judith says it's going to be the event of the season. I stared at the screen, blinking. What big bash? That was the first I'd heard about Willow Pines. About a party at all. I texted Judith. What's going on with the plans? No reply. Later that night, I checked our old group chat, the one we'd used to coordinate holidays and birthdays. I had been removed. Not just muted. Removed. I called Lena. They're freezing me out, I told her. I think they're planning something separate. Without me. She paused. Did you talk to Ron? No. I don't want to drag him into this. Well, she said gently, if they're making moves behind your back, maybe it's time you speak up. I tried. I really did. But every time I asked Judith for updates, she'd wave me off with cheerful vagueness. It's all coming together. Don't worry your head. Jake, just focus on work. And when I pressed Mike, he played dumb. Dude, I thought you knew. Judith's handling the party. Big family thing. It's what Dad would want. No one asked what Ron wanted. No one seemed to care that I had planned for something intimate, thoughtful, and quiet. Now it was ballooning into some kind of retirement circus, and I wasn't even part of the planning anymore. That night, I pulled up the travel account records and just stared at the balance. Years of saving. All for a man who taught me how to use a lathe, how to weld clean lines, how to shut up and show up. I'd spent months thinking I was honoring him, but now I wasn't even sure if anyone noticed, or if they ever really did. It was a Thursday evening when I walked into the lion's den. I'd just gotten off a 10-hour shift, hands still smelling faintly of de-icing fluid, when Lena texted me. Judith says planning meeting at the house. 7 p.m. You going? I hadn't been invited directly, again, but I showed up anyway. The second I stepped into the living room of my childhood home, I knew I'd made a mistake. The smell of coffee and floral potpourri hit me like memory, but the warmth was gone. The air buzzed with voices and laughter. Judith holding court at the head of the dining table, Mike grinning as he passed around samples of cake from a bakery I'd never heard of. Judith looked up and spotted me. "Oh, Jake, good, you're here." It was the first time anyone acknowledged me. I nodded. "Yeah, figured I should be." Seeing as I planned the trip this was supposed to be. The room quieted for a half second, just long enough for everyone to feel the edge in my voice. Then Judith stood and gestured to a stack of binders. "We've got seating charts to finalize and some AV stuff to coordinate. Can you handle the slideshow? Maybe pick up some picture boards from Staples this weekend?" Slideshow? Picture boards? I blinked. "Sorry, am I doing errands now?" Judith's smile didn't budge. "It's a team effort. You know how it is. You're good at the technical stuff." Mike snorted from across the table. "Beats stressing over cake flavors, right?" Someone chuckled. Someone else mumbled something about delegating. The humiliation settled in my chest like a stone. "I had a plan," I said quietly. "A real one. For Ron. Alaska. The Northern Lights. Something personal." Judith waved her hand. Yes, very sweet. But let's be real, Jake. This is what people want. Food, family, a bit of dancing. Nobody wants to freeze in the dark to look at the sky. I swallowed hard. Ron did. Judith's face hardened. "Well, Ron's knees don't agree. And quite frankly, neither does the rest of the family. So let's focus on what we're doing now, okay?" Before I could respond, Mike jumped in. "Come on, man. You're being kind of dramatic." That was it. That was the exact moment it all tilted. "Dramatic?" I said. "I've been saving for years. Planning. Booking cabins. I bought him a custom thermos, for God's sake. And none of you, even asked what he wanted." Judith pressed her palms flat against the table. "Okay, enough." She turned to the group. "Let's take a quick break. Jake, can I talk to you in the kitchen?" The room emptied like a wave retreating from the shore. Just me and her now, standing 10 feet apart on opposite sides of a tile floor I used to mop when I was 12. Judith's voice dropped to a low, firm hum. "We talked it over. The whole family. This party means a lot to people. A lot of work has gone into it. And frankly, Jake, your attitude is starting to become a problem." I felt cold all over. "What are you saying?" She folded her arms. "We've decided it's best if you step back. Ron's not up for drama. You can sit this one out." I blinked. "You're uninviting me from the party I paid for." Judith didn't even blink. "We'll cover the rest. Don't worry about it." I nodded slowly, walked to the coat rack, picked up my jacket. "Actually," I said, my voice tight, "you won't need to cover a thing." I drove straight home, logged into the travel account, and withdrew every cent. Canceled the lodges, the train tickets, the thermos order. Every last booking. Done. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. They wanted a spectacle. I wanted meaning. And if I couldn't give Ron the trip he dreamed of, I wasn't going to let them turn it into a parade I wasn't allowed to walk in. I sat on my couch that night, staring at the blue light of the television while the news played quietly in the background. I don't remember a single word of it. My hands were still shaking. The kind of shaking that doesn't come from rage, not exactly, but from something deeper. Something cracked open inside me, like the ground underneath had shifted, and I wasn't sure what would still be standing when the dust cleared. The phone started buzzing about 20 minutes after I canceled the last booking. 3 missed calls from Mike, 4 from Judith, then 2 from my Aunt Lisa, who I hadn't heard from since last Thanksgiving, then more. The voicemails were all some version of the same thing: confusion, outrage, that overpracticed blend of fake concern and righteous indignation. "Jake, we need to talk about what you did. This isn't the time to throw a tantrum. Call me back. You're being completely unreasonable. This is supposed to be for your father. You're making it about yourself." I didn't respond. Not to any of them. Not until voicemail number 9. It was Ron. His voice cracked through the speaker like it had been recorded in a dream. Hesitant, soft. "Hey, buddy. I heard there's been some confusion. Not sure what's going on, but Judith said things got messy. I don't know. I'd really like to talk to you, Jake. Soon." That voicemail hurt more than the others combined, because it didn't sound angry. It sounded lost. Then, just when I thought I could breathe, a text came in from Mike. "There's something you need to see. It's worse than we thought." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to ignore it. Wanted to write him off like I'd started to write off all of them. But something about it felt different. Like maybe, for the first time in years, Mike wasn't just echoing Judith's script. I called him. He picked up fast. "I found something," he said. "No hello. No jokes. Just that. I need to show you in person. You're not gonna believe it." And just like that, the resentment in me took a back seat to something colder, something sharper. I agreed to meet. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Because maybe, just maybe, this mess ran even deeper than a canceled party. We met at a corner cafe just outside the city, the kind with chalkboard menus and cold lighting, where everyone pretended the coffee was better than it was. Mike was already there when I walked in, hunched over a manila folder like it held a nuclear code. He looked rough, not in the way I expected, though. Not defensive or smug, just rattled. Hey, he said, not looking up. I pulled out the chair across from him. What is this? He slid the folder across the table like he couldn't wait to get it away from him. Judith's office. That closet. I was looking for one of Dad's pension forms and found this taped inside the back of her file cabinet. I opened it. The first page was a printed email from Judith to a financial planner I didn't recognize. Subject line, redirecting Ron's distributions. I skimmed it, then read it again, slower. She had rerouted part of Ron's retirement income into a side account, under her name only, quietly, monthly, for years. That's not even the worst of it, Mike said, voice low. He pointed to the next section. There were more emails, dozens of them, exchanged over nearly a decade. Judith had been working to isolate Ron from everyone. Step by step, she'd cut off his old friends with excuses about his health. She'd pushed family away with passive-aggressive comments about less stress. And she had intercepted every message or card I'd ever sent that didn't go through her first. I thought he just got more private, I said, flipping through. I thought, maybe we just drifted. Mike shook his head. She made it happen, controlled every bit of access. Even changed the Wi-Fi password to keep him off video calls after his surgery. Said it was for his rest. Then I reached the letter. It was sealed, yellowed slightly with age. The return address in the top left corner belonged to my grandmother, my mom's mom, the one who used to send me handwritten cards every Christmas. I looked at Mike. She died when I was what, 20? 21, he said. That letter was dated 6 months before that. The envelope was unopened. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled the letter out. Jake, if you're reading this, it means someone finally let you see it. I asked Judith to give this to you after I passed, but I don't know if she will. I've had my doubts. This is about your trust. The one I set up for you when your mom died. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to give you options. To remind you that you were loved and seen, and that you've always mattered. Mike watched my face as I read. She told everyone Grandma left everything to a charity, he said. Told me there wasn't anything for you. Said Grandma thought you'd waste it. I believed her. God, I feel like an idiot. I folded the letter back along its worn creases. You're not the idiot, I said. We both were. Mike leaned back, his voice quieter now. You know what got me? She started doing the same thing to me. At first, it was just dismissing my ideas. Then she started managing my mail, offering to clean up my finances, controlling what I told Dad. He rubbed his eyes. I saw her do it to you for years and didn't say a thing, until she turned it on me. I didn't have the energy to be angry with him. Not anymore. Not when the evidence was laid out between us like a confession. I need time, I said. Mike nodded. I figured. But you should know. I'm with you now. Whatever you decide to do. I left the cafe with the folder under my arm. He didn't try to hug me. Didn't say anything else. And for once, that silence felt like solidarity. I didn't open the trust documents right away. The letter from my grandmother sat on my kitchen table all night like it was glowing. I kept rereading the part about the trust. I didn't even know she had one set up for me. She'd never mentioned it out loud. But then again, she'd been the quiet kind, the kind who paid attention when no one else did. The next morning, I called the bank listed in the letter. The voice on the other end was polite but guarded, until I gave them the reference number. Then everything changed. They found it. It was real. A modest trust fund, set up in my name. Delayed release until my 25th birthday, unless otherwise directed by the executor. That executor was Judith, and she had never delivered it. She submitted paperwork stating you had declined the funds. The bank rep said over the phone, said you didn't want the responsibility. I sat there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, my chest hollow. I hadn't declined anything. I hadn't even known it existed. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about everything that came with it. That trust fund was supposed to be my safety net, my head start, my moment to finally feel like someone believed in me. Instead, Judith had hidden it, lied, and let me spend the last decade thinking I was on my own. That evening, I called Mike and told him. He didn't even sound surprised. I figured it was something like that, he said. She never could stand the idea of anyone having independence. I heard the shame in his voice. The quiet guilt of someone who's just now realizing how deep the rot went. Look, he said, you don't know me anything. But if you decide to do something, confront her, take legal action, whatever, I'm with you, all the way. For the first time in years, I believed him. I spent the next 2 nights scanning the documents, sorting the emails, making a timeline, not out of rage, but out of necessity. I didn't want a confrontation driven by anger. I wanted the truth, clean, documented, unshakable. I started sketching out what I'd say, how I'd say it, what Ron deserved to hear. Because this wasn't just about Alaska anymore. This was about how someone rewrote our entire family story and how long I'd been letting her do it. I parked across the street from the house I grew up in. The porch light was already on, casting a soft yellow glow over the familiar front steps. I could see silhouettes moving inside. Judith, Mike, and Ron. I hadn't told them I was coming. The folders sat on the passenger seat beside me, the emails, the bank documents, the unopened letter from my grandmother. All of it, arranged in neat tabs, quiet as a loaded weapon. I sat for a moment, watching my breath fog up the windshield. Then I got out, crossed the street, and rang the doorbell. Judith opened the door. Her expression flickered for a second, surprise, maybe even fear, but she smoothed it out quick. Jake, we weren't expecting a. I need to talk to everyone, I said. She hesitated. Now's really not. It's important. Her eyes narrowed, but she stepped aside. Ron sat on the couch, his posture a little slumped, like he'd been pulled into another conversation he didn't want to be part of. Mike stood near the fireplace, arms folded, eyes locked on me. I walked to the center of the room and placed the folder on the coffee table. This, I said, is everything. No one moved. Emails, letters, bank records, every lie, every piece of manipulation, every decision you made about this family without telling us. Judith laughed, brittle and sharp. Jake, what are you even talking about? This again? We've been through it. No, I said, louder. You've talked over me. You've talked around me. But you're not doing that now. I flipped open the first tab. This is you rerouting Ron's pension, setting up private accounts. Without telling him, I flipped to the next. These are emails where you told a financial advisor you were managing Ron's assets personally to avoid what you called family meddling. Judith's face turned pale. Mike stepped forward. I saw it too. I found it in her files. Her head snapped toward him. You little. I kept going. I said, found the trust Grandma left me. The one you hid. The letter you never gave me. The money you decided I didn't need. Because why? Because I might use it to get away from you. Judith's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I turned to Ron. His hands trembled as he reached for the letter. I watched him open it slowly, his eyes scanning the page. His late wife's mother's handwriting, soft and careful, wrapping him in something old and painful. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at the page. When he finally looked up, his voice was hoarse. You lied to me. Judith took a step toward him. Ron, He held up a hand. Don't. That one word landed like a thunderclap. Ron looked at me. You planned that trip for me. I nodded. He set the letter down. Then that's what I want. Judith turned away, arms crossed. Oh, come on. She's not even here to defend herself. Ron looked at her like he didn't recognize her. I need you to leave, he said. Judith froze. Just for a while, he added, softer now. I need space. I need to think. Silence blanketed the room. Thick. Final. Judith didn't argue. For once, she just walked upstairs, grabbed her purse, and left. The door clicked shut behind her. Ron leaned back on the couch and closed his eyes. Nobody spoke for a long time. Mike looked at me. You okay? I nodded. Are you? He gave a small shrug. Getting there. Ron opened his eyes again, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for telling me the truth. I nodded once. No victory in it, just truth. At last, the party was canceled. No more centerpieces, no playlist, no catering orders. Judith's spectacle unraveled overnight, and nobody fought to save it. Just like that, the illusion cracked, and once it did, nobody could pretend it hadn't been built on something rotten. In the days that followed, the house got quieter. Ron didn't talk much, but the way he moved, slower, more deliberate, told me everything. He took down the wall calendar with Judith's handwriting on every square and replaced it with a blank one from the hardware store. He started eating breakfast alone at the kitchen table with the newspaper and no background noise. He also started therapy. Mike told me he found a flyer in the waiting room at his gym and left it on the counter, not expecting anything. But 2 days later, Ron made the call. Not dramatic, not defiant, just calm. Like he was finally doing something for himself. That was new. He even went back to his old hobby, woodworking. Not all at once, and not the big pieces he used to build, but I saw the dust creeping back into the garage, saw the hammer hanging back on its hook. The smell of cedar started to linger again. It smelled like life. As for me, I contacted an attorney. We're working on reclaiming access to the trust fund. It'll take time, and there's paperwork, but it's moving. And it's not even about the money anymore. It's about the fact that I was never supposed to be forgotten. No matter how quiet or steady or low maintenance I was, that trust had a name on it. My name. And now, finally, I'm taking it back. I also started seeing a therapist. It felt strange at first. I sat in the waiting room thinking maybe I didn't belong there, that my pain wasn't loud enough to justify a whole appointment. But then I started talking. About Ron. About Judith. About all the years I spent trying to be useful instead of heard. And it was like cracking open a window after years of stale air. Mike and I aren't suddenly best friends. We don't text every day or talk about our feelings. But when I showed up at Ron's house to help fix a broken fence post, Mike was already there, hammer in hand, sweat on his collar. He handed me a cold bottle of water and said, "Glad you came." And that was enough. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just clear. I've started building boundaries, real ones, not out of spite, but out of respect for myself, for the parts of me that spent too long waiting to be chosen. And this time, I'm choosing me. The cabin sat 3 hours north of Winnipeg, tucked between a frozen lake and a strip of pine trees that looked like they'd been painted onto the horizon. It was small, nothing fancy, a wood stove, a twin bed, a kettle, and a view that went on forever. That's where I went. Not Alaska, not the dream I once planned for someone else. This trip was mine. I booked it a week after the trust papers cleared. I didn't tell anyone, not even Lena. I just packed light, flew up, and drove the rest of the way in a rented pickup with frost on the windows and a radio that only got one station. I brought two things with me: the thermos I'd had engraved for Ron and the letter my grandmother wrote me. Both had been meant for someone else's moment. Now, they were mine. Each morning I filled that thermos with coffee, sat by the window wrapped in a wool blanket, and watched the sun rise in silence. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through emails. I just sat. I wrote in a journal, not about the betrayal or the confrontation, or even Judith. I wrote about memories that still made me smile, about Ron showing me how to change the oil in my first car, about the time my grandmother slipped me an extra 20 with a wink and said, "For snacks, not bills." I wrote about the kind of man I wanted to be and the kind I never wanted to become. At night, the stars came out like someone had punched holes in the sky. I stood out there with the thermos pressed to my hands, my breath fogging in the cold, and finally saw the lights. They weren't as vivid as the ones in Alaska might have been, but they danced across the sky just the same, quiet, slow, patient, like they'd been waiting. And maybe they had. Not for Ron, not for a party. For me. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I just stood there, finally still, finally enough. On the last night, I opened the journal and wrote a single line before packing it away. "You were never invisible. You just gave too much to people who refused to see you." The next morning, I poured the last of the coffee into the thermos, packed my bag, and shut the cabin door behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. I'd spent most of my life trying to honor other people's stories. Now, I was finally living my own.